All right, so once again, good morning, good evening, and good afternoon based upon wherever you're joining us from today. So today our webinar session is going to be on fundamentals of Microsoft security compliance and identity. So from this meetup group, we are planning to do a webinar series, which is going to be heavily focused on Microsoft security compliance and identity, because that is one of those topics which mostly doesn't get discussed quite often. And in most of the user groups or events or webinars that we've been doing, right? We talk a lot about Office 365 development, teams, and a lot of other things. But the focus towards security compliance and identity has been not a lot. So that's exactly the thought process behind coming up with a webinar series of this sort. And this is the very first session that we are starting with. So these are some session guidelines. So the planned duration for our webinar today is going to be for about 75 minutes. And it might get extended based on the questions we get during the session. Of course, questions, I really appreciate if you have questions. So if you have any questions while I'm doing the session, please put it on the chat window. I'll take it towards the end of the session. And but just in case if you feel that you want to voice out your question, please hold it till the end of the session, right? So that I can we can have that we can take that during the Q&A time. Of course, this webinar is being recorded, and I'll be posting the recordings to the YouTube channel that you see there. And just in case if you are not a member of this meetup group, so this is the URL. So please go ahead and become a member of this meetup group, because there is a lot of stuff that we have planned from this user group, and we don't want you to miss that. All right, so a little bit about myself. So my name is Vignesh Ganesan, and I see that I haven't even mentioned my name in the first place. So my name is Vignesh Ganesan, and I work as an enterprise cloud architect and a technology strategist. I've been in the industry for almost 10 plus years. I basically started doing Active Directory, Windows servers. Then I was a SharePoint guy for a very long time. I've been known for SharePoint in the industry for quite some time. Then I started moving into Office 365. So I was dealing with SharePoint and Office 365 parallelly. So off late for the past few months, I've started doing cloud security also. So I'm not a cloud security expert or something of that sort. So I'm also somebody who's very new, who has just been trying to understand how cloud security works, how we need to get started with things, so on and so forth. So I've been a blogger on Vignesh SharePoint Thoughts. So that's my own blog site. Then I used to blog on European SharePoint Community, Collab 365, C Shop, and Hubfly blog site. Although I'm not blogging off late a lot, but I used to be blogging at some point in time in the past. I often speak in a lot of webinars, user group, and conferences across the globe. And I'm the chapter lead for the C Sharp Corner Bangalore chapter, and I'm also the ambassador for the AOS India community. I've been a C Sharp Corner MVP for almost 3 times, and I've completed almost close to 20 Microsoft certifications over the years. And as you all know, so I'm the chief organizer of the Microsoft 365 Power Platform and Cloud Security India user group. So that's all about myself. So before we even get started with the webinar, I'd like to take advantage of this evening and introduce you the India Cloud Security Summit uh, event. It's a sort of a virtual conference that we are doing. So if you haven't heard about it yet, so please, that is the event website. Just Google www.indiacloudsecuritysummit.com. So you land on the event website. It's completely free. So this is a one-day virtual event, which is going to be completely focused on Microsoft Cloud Security Stack. So we'll be talking about Microsoft 365 security, Azure security, Dynamics 365, Power Platform. So completely focused on security only. So if this is something that you're interested upon, so please don't miss it. So this is a caution, right? So in today's session, I'm going to be discussing about the Microsoft security compliance and identity only from a Microsoft 365 standpoint. Because one thing that you need to understand is this concept called as security compliance and identity, it cuts across your M365, Azure, and also Dynamics 365, right? So, but my session today is completely focused on Microsoft 365 only. So just in case if that's not what you're here for, so if you want to drop or if you want to skip this, feel free to do whatever you want. But this is completely going to be focused only on from M365 standpoint. And I'm also going to make some assumptions today, and I believe you folks are okay with me making these assumptions. So any of you who has joined my session today, I believe either you're falling into either one of these roles, right? So you've either been an Office 365 administrator, or you're currently working as an Office 365 administrator, or maybe a SharePoint administrator, Office 365 developer, Exchange, Teams. So maybe you're not really wearing the hat of a cloud security guy in your organization, but maybe you're dealing with it in some form or shape, but that has not been your full-fledged role, like not completely focused only on doing cloud security, right? And maybe you're working as a cloud architect, designing solutions, deploying solutions, or maybe you're into the pre-sale side of the house, wherein you're like a cloud solutions architect, right? Or maybe you're one among the C-suite, like somebody like a CTO or CISO or CIO, or somebody who's on the top level, right? So I'm going to make some assumptions that you guys fall in one of these buckets. If not, if I'm wrong, please feel free to let me know that in the chat, right? But this is a safe assumption that I'm going to make. All right, so let's have some fun before getting started, right? So which one here do you think is a hacker? So you can just give a guess if you want to put it on the chat, if you want to really take a guess or whatever. I'll just give a couple of seconds here. So which one do you think could be a hacker? Okay, I see some interesting options. Okay. All right, so those are really good guesses, right? So, traditionally, what we have seen in movies or in a lot of other places, right? A hacker seems to look like somebody who's on the left side, right? Wearing that hoodie and he looks kind of all evil and stuff. And to the right hand side, this pretty looking woman, right? We tend to normally, she's just doing her stuff, right? But in real life, that's not how it is, right? You don't really know who is going to put your data at rest, who is stealing your information, who is causing permanent damage to your organization, so on and so forth, right? So I just want to start with this, start with this backdrop so that we can get going into the session today. All right. So this is sort of the agenda that I have for our session today. So what do I expect, right? So we'll be spending some time talking about what is Microsoft 365 security, right? And let me tell this very upfront. This very session is completely called as just fundamentals, right? So if you're here, uh, with the understanding that I'm going to show you some crazy demos, help you understand, or see, that is not what this session is meant about. We will be going there after this. So this is a webinar series. This is the very first part, and this is the introduction. I really don't want to go ahead and pump everything into this one single session. This is going to be completely theory, right? I'll try to make sure that this is not really going to be boring, but just think of this session as, say, for instance, you bought a gadget and you're reading at the user manual about how to use it, right? So you can't just simply keep doing demos and all these things. You really need to understand what I'm really getting into, right? What really exists. Only then have I even figured out my path about how should I go to cloud security, right? So what are the different elements which Microsoft has? Who are the different players in this market? What exactly is there? So that is what this session is all about. So I really want to tell that very upfront. So with that, the first thing that we'll be looking on is Microsoft 365 security. Next, we'll be spending some time talking about Microsoft Identity, which is nothing but your Azure AD. We'll try to understand what is Azure AD. A good amount of time we'll be spending on Microsoft Identity. Then we'll be talking about Microsoft Compliance, right? So we'll spend some time talking about these three pillars, just trying to understand what are they, what are the problems that they are trying to solve, and why you need to even focus on it. Next, I'll be talking about building your own cybersecurity framework, right? So you might be wondering, what do you mean by building my own cybersecurity framework, right? So just hold on to this. Maybe when I'm talking about that, that will make a lot more sense to you. And finally, we'll try to understand the big picture and how to get started with Microsoft security, right? Maybe if you're somebody who's interested in who wants to shift into a cloud security role, because right now the market is really perfect for looking at cloud security opportunities. And if you want to get started, how we need to start thinking about that. So this is my agenda today. So let's move on. Now, like everybody here has a vision, right? Let's say I'm going to assume that you guys all want to start understanding cloud security. You want to know, all right, this is really exciting, right? I mean, maybe my colleagues are making a lot of money, people are moving into cloud security roles, they're really doing good. I also need to move there. But then when you come and look into the market, this is all that you see. And for a person who's coming from a development or from a different background, right, all these names are going to be like, oh, what the hell is this, right? I mean, that's what you're going to be looking at this, because maybe to certain extent you might understand like identity and access management. Yeah, I get it, right? Conditional access, but what do you mean by a CASB, right? What do you mean by a SIM? What do you mean by threat protection, right? There is just so many things. And the problem here is for each and every single capability you see here, there are hundreds of vendors out there, hundreds of products. So this is really, the market is really confusing. At least if you're not coming from a cybersecurity background or a cloud security background, you're not really going to understand how this works. So I'm just going to make sure that we focus only on these three main concepts. So the first we'll be talking about Microsoft 365 security, identity, and compliance. So to begin with, let's talk about Microsoft security alone. Like, what do we mean by that? So what are the different components in that, and how do you, and what exactly Microsoft has in that space? So these are some current trends in the security landscape, at least, right? So if you look at this, these are some numbers which I'm not saying. This is a survey result which is coming from the BCG remote work study and also from the Gartner CXO survey. And what it says is there are about 300 million global office workers are expected to be working from home. And I believe this is not going to come as a surprise to you because with the given pandemic situation, with the new normal that we are working on, some companies have made a decision that we'll be permanently working from home, or at least in countries like India, we don't even know when we are going to go back to office. And there are some companies who started this hybrid work culture, right? Maybe in a week, maybe few people have to go to office and the remaining population will be working from home and they'll be swapping. Like, so these are different cultures that are emerging in the workforce. And with this, given fact, and a 40% of CIOs indicate that information security is a primary risk, right? Because earlier you used to work from your office. I mean, it had a confined boundary. You're working within your firewall, you're working within your corporate network. Things were very well in control. Nobody could, I mean, you couldn't do anything wrong, or even if you did something wrong, right, people could catch you. But that's not the case here, right? You're working from home, you could be doing anything and there is literally nobody around to watch what exactly you're doing, right? So that is, so what we need to understand is, so definitely there is a problem. It's not that your employer doesn't trust you, but you really never know who's that one person who is working with a malicious intent and what exact damage he could cause to your company, right? And we're also, so what this exactly is doing is this is also navigating as or shifting to a digital world. So, right. So the nature of the business and the work that we are doing has changed, right? I mean, it's the same way, the work is same, but how we operate has completely changed. The conventional security tools have not kept pace, right? So whatever we had before, whatever kind of security solutions that your organization had before, well, they were really okay. Maybe they were meant to solve the problem at that point in time. But now with the new normal that we are living in, these simply couldn't keep up to that pace. And the cost of breach and regulations are increasing, right? So if you can see the last top 10 security, all the threat, all the hacks that has happened, it's been crazy, at least after people started working from home. So attackers are simply going after every data and they want to steal about it. And if you're losing data, then it is just not a damage for your company, it is a damage. Even you lose your reputation in front of the customers are not going to trust you anymore. It's just simply a permanent damage which is coming to your brand, right? So, and you also need to understand that these with these are the security pillars of the digital era. So one is information protection. So meaning, what I mean by that is protecting the information that you have. It could be any kind of information about yourself, information related to your employer, information about your customer, any kind of confidential information that you want to have. So these are some pillars of the digital era. Next is users, which is you, first of all, right? So the identity that you carry, so that you carry, I'm sorry, that is mainly a part of the digital era. It's good. It's your, maybe you're using your Office 365 username and password or any form of digital identity that you're using. That is one of the pillar of your digital era. Then is the device from which you're operating from, right? Today, if you look at me, I at least have a couple of like two laptops, then maybe I have an iPhone, then I have an iPad, so many of such data, I have so many such devices, which is all from which I can access my office content. It could be my emails, my SharePoint, my OneDrive. So I really need to make sure that I have the proper guardrails, proper security to make sure that nobody is stealing data, at least my corporate data from these kind of devices. Because earlier it was just your laptop to access your office information, your employer's information. But now things have changed. We simply have 4 to 5 devices for doing the same purpose, right? And of course, the location from which you're accessing. So that is also at threat, as I said, right? So you're working from home, you're working from office, it makes a lot of difference. So these are the four pillars in that way which Microsoft security focuses upon. So first is your identity and access management, threat protection, information protection, and cloud security. I just want to take a pause here on the slide. So if you're wondering what is IAM even doing here, right? Because of course in the beginning of the session I said that we'll be talking specifically about Microsoft identity. Of course I'm going to do that, but you also need to understand that when it comes to Microsoft security, your IAM, identity and access management, plays a very key role. So that is why this has been listed as a core pillar here. So if you're somebody who's trying to understand or who wants to learn more about Microsoft security, these are the four pillars that you need to start focusing upon and all the related products. So your identity and access management is nothing but your Azure AD. So everything related to Azure AD is what you should be looking at. Then your threat protection. It could be your SIM, XDR. On the next slide, I'll be talking about all the tools which we have under that pillar. Next is your information protection. As I said, information product, it could be your own data, your customers' data, your employers' data, and how you go ahead and protect that. And last but not least is your cloud security. Like how do you control, how do you secure cloud as a whole? Just not the data, the entire cloud, the entire Office 365, the entire Azure, the entire, or maybe AWS or whatever you're running. How do you safeguard all these things? And if you're looking at the point solutions for this, right? So Microsoft has about 40 solutions for this purpose. If you look at the identity and access management, you will see everything related to just Azure AD futures. Because what you need to understand is uh, no matter whatever Microsoft cloud you're using. Now, Microsoft has three clouds. One is your Office 365 or Microsoft 365. Next is Microsoft Azure. Then you have Dynamics 365. These are the three clouds which Microsoft has. And no matter whatever cloud you're using, your identity and access management layer is always going to be Azure AD only. That is where your identities are going to live, right? The moment you subscribe for one of these cloud solutions, you'll be seeing Azure AD, an Azure AD tenant, which comes along with that subscription. Next is your information protection, and these are the different services that you should be focusing upon when it comes from an information protection standpoint. Now, this might look like a lot of, I'm not really getting into the depths of it, but later I'll be talking in detail about what are the specific solutions when I'm talking about data discovery or when I'm talking about DLP. What is the equivalent Microsoft product for that? And let's say if you're not a Microsoft shop, who are the other vendors in this space who are offering the same kind of solution, right? So that is also very important, because when you're doing cloud security, it is just not about Microsoft alone. I mean, that's not the way how all the other companies operate. Maybe I can be so passionate about Microsoft, you can be so passionate about Microsoft, but when it comes to your employer, right, they really need to make a different sort of decisions. There is a lot of cost involved, and they really want to be polycloud, like, or when I say polycloud, like multiple clouds, or they really want to have multiple vendors. There is a lot of discussions which go on back and forth. So it's very important that you understand who are the other players who are offering the same kind of solution. Then you also have threat protection, and these are the different services that we need to understand when you're talking about threat. And finally, your cloud security, right? This is cloud as a whole. Things such as your cloud access security broker, right? Say, for instance, this is going to help you get an insight about what are the other third-party cloud services which people are using in my company, right? This is where the shadow IT comes into picture. Maybe from your organization, OneDrive is only the maybe the personal cloud storage that you have approved from IT. And then you later see that people are using Google Drive and Box and a lot of other solutions which nobody has even approved, right? And if you really want to get insight about what are those other solutions which people are using and how can I go after that and block those, right? And then you also have the cloud security posture management, which is called of cloud security, right? Because when you're configuring cloud, there is quite a possibility that you can't get everything correct. There can be configuration related errors. Maybe that was not intentional, but as a matter of oversight, you did it and you simply didn't realize that, right? So your cloud security posture management, your cloud workload protection, all these things comes under cloud security. So this is to govern or secure cloud as a whole. Now, if you look at all these things, right, this might really look exciting. So you'll be like, yeah, Vignesh, I understand all of these solutions, everything is great, but the problem here is this all comes with a cost, right? a lot of these things which you're seeing here, this is not something which comes readily available, right? What I mean by readily available is the moment you purchase an Office 365 subscription, you're not going to get everything that you're seeing here. There are very, very limited things that you might be getting. And for every shiny thing that you want to go after, Microsoft is going to say that, wait, there is a cost involved for this. This is the kind of pricing, and this is how we need to go about it, right? So if you're at all you're really wondering, right? Hey, I subscribed for a Microsoft Cloud. So unless and until I go ahead and purchase any of these add-ons, is my data not at all secure? Am I not at all, is my data at risk? Are people going to steal my data? That is not really the way it is supposed to be, right? There are always certain default controls which comes along with the product itself. When I say default, these are native. No matter whatever subscription you're using, you could be even using the smallest subscription in Office 365, the very cheapest one, right? And maybe you can be running an Office 365 E5 or M365 E5, that kind of a sort, right? But there are certain security controls which are default, which Microsoft gives. No matter what, you get that, right? So let's try to understand from that picture, like what are the default security controls that I might be getting? I mean, despite all these other good looking shiny things that I'm showing. The first thing that you need to understand is when you're working with cloud, right, it's always a shared responsibility model. I'll just take a pause here. Just take a look at what do I mean by a shared responsibility model, right? So if you look at the slide, just because you subscribed for a Microsoft cloud service, it doesn't mean that it is Microsoft's responsibility to take care of everything. That's not the way it works. Okay, you need to really understand that Microsoft is just the custodian of your data. They can't go ahead and own everything for you, right? There are certain level of things which they can do. Then there are certain level of things which you have to do. And if you deliberately sabotage that, and if you're putting your data at risk, there is nothing that you can do. You cannot go back to Microsoft and say, hey, this has happened and you need to pay me a penalty or whatever. They'll simply say that we didn't even commit for this in the first place, right? So you should clearly understand what Microsoft can do and what is that you can do. So whatever you're seeing in this blue marks here, this is the job of the customer. And whatever you're seeing in the light blue, the cloud provider. So this is what Microsoft is going to be I mean, today we are talking about Microsoft only. So this is the responsibility of Microsoft. Okay. And this is something called as the shared responsibility model. Now, talking about what are the default controls, the very first thing that you need to understand, the very, very first thing is Microsoft has something called as defense in depth. And this is something which I've spoken a couple of years back in a previous session that I've done on cloud security. I really wanted to bring up the same concept here because when you're understanding Microsoft security, people really think that they really need to go after all this EMS E3 or E5 or ADP1 or ADP2. They don't really have an understanding of what exactly comes out of the box. What are the default controls, right? So this is that very, very basic thing that you all need to understand called as defense in depth approach. So what this means is this is the multi-layered security control, which how Microsoft is securing your data in the cloud. When I say securing, it starts from how Microsoft is operating in their data centers. What are the different kind of security layers that they have, right? Starting from here, the facility, then on the network level, what kind of security they have, then within the network and on the computers which are within the data centers, what kind of security controls they have on that. When it comes to the Office 365 application itself, who has access, who doesn't have access, what they really need to do to get access, right? And can they even get the access like that? And then when it really comes to the data in itself, how exactly data is handled within the Microsoft data center, right? So to talk in detail about that, I'm going to just bring in a slide or something which I did few years back, which you guys don't mind because there is something which I really, really want to take advantage here and share in this session. So once again, this is that defense in-depth multi-dimensional approach that I'm talking about. So to begin with, so these are all the Office 365 data centers. And as I said, this is something from content which was shared on TechEd 2014. Not it's that old. Okay. So if you are, so this is not the exact data centers. Now Microsoft has a large amount of Office 365 data centers. So please don't go with this slide, right? So what you need to understand it really starts here. This is a server rack, right? Like this in your data centers, you're going to have a lot of server rack, right? And all these server racks, of course, you could see this is how, I mean, a lot of you might have seen a data center, visited a data center, and this is a pic of a Microsoft data center, right? You have server racks and a lot of racks are kept like this. Just begins here. And Yeah, so this is how we have different data. Just speak of data centers. So this is on a physical security layer. What I mean is the security which Microsoft offers for the data center in itself. So the first thing that you need to understand is they have seismic bracing. This is basically for the fire controls and all, right? So perimeter security. No unauthorized personnel can be entering that particular, a particular facility, because it's not, if you don't have any role to play there, you're simply not going to be allowed inside a data center. And if you have been to a data center, you know how many level of checks would be done. I personally been to one in the US, so I know what kind of not a Microsoft data center, for a different customer whom I was working with. There were multiple level of security checks that was done. Then you have fire suppression, multi-factor authentication, extensive monitoring. So this is something which is being offered on the physical layer itself, like even before entering inside the data center, right? Before entering into all the places where the servers are kept. Now let's take one more step ahead, right? What if, let's come one more step down, like on the network level, what exactly happens? And for the sake of our discussion here, I'm gonna talk about SharePoint Online. Because why SharePoint? Because I've been a SharePoint guy for many, many years, and I'm a huge fan of SharePoint, right? So I really want to pick SharePoint as an example here. If you look at this, right? So even when the data is being split across, now here's the computer, here's the mobile, I mean, here's a mobile device, which is, let's say it's accessing a SharePoint data, right? These are the network firewalls which are built between, even within the data centers like this. Now, it is not that when data is moving from here to here or back and forth or whatever, it's not that all the ports are kept open. It is only specific ports, only those specific ports which are kept, which are meant to be kept open, only those are being kept open. And there is also a proper encryption. When I'm saying encryption, I'm talking about AES 256. It is only these kind of encryption layers that are kept. So even within the data center itself, at a network layer, when things are moving from the front end to a back end, from an application layer to a database layer, from a database layer to application or web front end or whatever, there are proper security firewalls that are kept. And it is always that only specific ports are open. Not all the ports are open, so that somebody can take advantage of that and start hitting your data. And the other thing which also you need to understand is, if at all you've been working with Azure, you have this concept called as Azure application layers, right? So you can also use all these things here. So even from an application standpoint, right? It is from this application, only the port will be open to this. It's not like all the ports will be open. So those kind of things can also be configured here. And that's how it has been configured. Now let's come one more step down on the host on the application. Now, what I'm talking about here is the computers that have been kept within the data center for maybe for monitoring Office 365, the data that you have kept there for any kind of those kind of reasons, right? So they go through a proper patching and malware protection, right? And there is an auditing of all the operation and access that you've been performing on that computer, right? So it's not possible that some guy can just, or maybe a person who is an authorized Office 365 administrator, he wants to perform some maintenance activities. So he goes there, he opens the computer there. He can't simply open a web browser like Google Chrome or something and download a malicious software. That's not possible, because there will be proper uh, locks, application locks that are going to be configured. So there are only very, very specific things that you can do, and whatever you're doing gets logged, right? And they also have a proper security development life cycle. So people who are working within this facility, they have to go through a rigorous training, which gets refreshed every year. So what you need to understand is, even at the host layer also, there is a lot of these kind of these kind of checks that is being done, and zero standing permissions in the server. This is really, really key. So what this means is, there is no single person at Microsoft who can have a permanent access to your data in Microsoft 365. Now, that doesn't mean that they cannot have access. Of course, they can, but it is not that they're not going to always hold that access. If they want to get that access, there is a proper methodology, or there is a proper process that they have to go through, right? And the next slide is going to talk about that. Now, no matter, even if I say that there is zero access, nobody is going to have access to your data. Sometimes it so happens, right? Maybe you need to go and access one of the customers' information. This could be a scenario wherein somebody, maybe one of the customers, has deleted a SharePoint file. 6 months or 1 year after that, they come back to Microsoft. They say that, hey, I mean, this is an important data. We want you guys to go ahead and retrieve it for us, because if I don't have this information, then there is a big problem, right? So they come, they open a support case, and so what happens is, at this point in time, now the Microsoft engineers, or they really need to come back here, and they really need to put in those racks once again, and they need to access their data. So even in that case, right, These are some eligibility that is going to be verified. As I said, there is going to be a proper check done that's saying that is this person from the he is he employed from Microsoft in the first place, right? Does he belong to the proper business unit? Is he even allowed to come here? Like when I was at Microsoft last year, my role was completely into technical pre-sale. So even if a request like this comes, I can just point it to the right team and that's it. My job is done. I can't even go beyond this and get access to what is happening there or whatever it is, right? So it's very, very secure. So they really check whether it is the right business unit which is requesting for that ask and whether that person is even entitled to go after it, right? And once this happens, now this is what it is, a request gets kicked in, right? And this request goes ahead and does two things. It is going to send a request to the person's manager. Now this guy could be the one who's going to go to the data center, pull up that rack, put in that, and so that he can retrieve the data, right? So it goes to his manager. Now the manager, once he approves, is going to get a temporary access. Now the keyword there is temporary, right? So it is not a permanent access, it is only temporary. You get the temporary access, and even for the temporary access, what you need to understand it is going to be a high entropy password, like 26 alphanumeric crazy one-time password only. So those kind of things. Then he goes in, he pulls out whatever it is, then he keeps then he makes the data come live, and the customer gets to access it. So even for somebody to go after and get even a data which has been deleted, this is the amount of work which has to go after. So which is why when you always go and open a ticket for with Microsoft to get a data that you have deleted, first of all, it's a huge cost because you need to understand that there is so much of work which has to be going beyond this. And for administrators, this is something which I just spoke about. Like these are for the people who are working in these kind of roles within the Microsoft data center. Like they have proper background checks done, account management, and of course they have to go through this security training very often. This will be specifically people from the engineering team, right? So they have to keep doing these trainings and all this kind of stuff. Now, let's go one more layer down when it comes to the data in itself, right? So we spoke about the physical layer, then we spoke about network, then we spoke about the host and application. Now let's talk about the data itself. So we all understand that Office 365 is a shared model, right? Of course, you have something called as Office 365 dedicated. Let's say if you as a customer who want to have a specific data center, Office 365 data center only for you, that is also available, but that has a different pricing, licensing, something which is different, which you can talk to your Microsoft rep. But mostly all the Office 365 tenants that we are running, it's a shared model, right? So even when it comes to the data, Microsoft makes sure that there is a proper customer data isolation and data encryption is followed during data at transit and even when data is kept at rest. Now, what I mean by that is when they have to move your data from one data center to another data center, they make sure that it is going through a proper encryption layer, right? And they follow proper operational best practices also. And customer data isolation, since it is going to be kept in the same hardware, they will be making sure that your data is not mingled with the other customers' data. And the way they do this is by using the Azure Active Directory organizational units, which is going to offer that logical isolation boundary. And the last thing that you need to understand is also encryption. Now, encryption, when your data is kept at rest. So what I mean by that is your OneDrive storage, your SharePoint storage, whatever data that you're putting in inside Teams or whatever, like these are all data at rest, right? So you need this data that goes and sits inside one of these hard drives in the Microsoft data center. And of course, they have the BitLocker also for that. And data transit, when I say data transit, when you're sharing content over the internet, or as I said, when data get transferred from one data center to another data center, there is also data in transit, and AES 265 algorithm is the one that is going to be used. Okay. Now, one key thing which is really exciting for me out of all these things that you have seen about is the encrypted threaded storage. And I really have a small animation which I really want to show in this session. And by the way, this was not me who did it. This was shared at 2014 by one of those program managers who was working on that. I simply took advantage of that content, right? So if you're somebody who has been doing SharePoint on-prem for quite some time, and if you still remember SharePoint on-prem, there was this concept called as shredded storage, which was introduced in SharePoint 2013, right? So what this simply means is when you're uploading, let's say, a file, a document or whatever to your SharePoint on-prem site, earlier it used to go ahead and sit inside, I mean, even now it goes ahead and sits inside the SQL database, but it could be that one single large chunk of file. And every time you keep updating it, maybe if it's a 10 MB file, it will, for every changes, it will be adding one more 10 MB, one more 10 MB. And that was quite a problem for a very, very long time, right? So with an encrypted threaded storage, what happens is, let's say if you're pushing a 10 MB file, it doesn't go and sit inside just one single location within the content DB. It gets shredded across different layers. Maybe when I'm showing this thing, you'll be understanding this. Now just think of this as a document which I'm pushing to SharePoint online. Okay. Now Microsoft sort of they split this document into multiple chunks, right? So, and each chunk has its own encryption key. From here, what they do is they have this safe logs that you're seeing. Now, these safe logs are nothing but these are the storage containers which you see in Microsoft Azure, right? And all these safe logs, they also have, and then there is a key store service also, which is an Office 365 service. And these storage locations that I'm talking about in the top, they also have their own set of keys, which is being generated from this key store, right? So as I said, the document here, each document is split into multiple chunks and each of them has its own key. Then you have this Azure storage container. Then you have the key store, which is nothing but an Office 365 service. And the job of the key store is to generate the key to secure these safes. Now, this is how we have it set up, right? Now, see what happens. Now, when you upload a file, it comes here and the document that you have uploaded, it gets split into multiple chunks and each chunk goes ahead and sits into one of these safes, which is nothing but the Azure storage. Okay. And then what happens is you get one more key here, and this key and all the keys which were generated here, they get encrypted one more time from one more key which is being generated here. So that is the first encryption which happens, and then there is one more encryption which also happens on that key which has been encrypted before. So there are two layers of encryption which is being happening, and this gets saved inside the content DB. So unlike your on-prem, it is not just your content DB has all your data. So what if you come and see inside the content DB in SharePoint Online, it is just going to be a metadata and bunch of keys because your data is not living here. It is, if you come and see here, it will be metadatas and pointers pointing to each and every single file. So why is this even better? This might be looking good from an elasticity, or maybe if you want to retain stuff at a later point in time, this might really look good. But how is this really adding value from a security standpoint? Now just pay attention to this. Let's say an attacker, he gains access to the content DB here, right? So when he even gets access to this, all he has here is metadata and a bunch of keys. That's it. And because all the data is split across chunks and is kept here, data is not really leaving here. It is just some pointers which are here and the metadata and the keys. So even if he somehow breaks through and gets access to the content DB, there is nothing he can really do with that. Uh, Now let's see this. Now what happens? Like now, say for instance, the attacker gets access to the safe, like Tom Cruise coming from top of the ceiling, right? And he starts stealing all the safes, right? So even if he comes here, all he has is saves, and all these saves are already being encrypted, right? And it is the file is kept into multiple safes, right? And let's imagine a scenario wherein, say, for instance, this guy is even more smart enough. He gets access to the key store itself, which is an Office 365 service. So even if he comes here, it is just the keys. And the problem with these keys is, right, these keys, they get rotated quite often, right? They be keeping. So you need to think of this like this, right? Maybe you walked into a bank and you somehow got access to the bunch of keys for all the safe locks. But the problem here is none of those keys were labeled. So you don't really know which key is meant for what, because Microsoft, they simply keep rotating the keys quite often. So this is the level of security just for SharePoint Online that I'm talking about. And I'm talking back in the days of 2014. Whatever content you're seeing now is on 2014, but now we are like 7 years after that. So I'm pretty sure Microsoft might have brought in a lot of better security controls now. And so this is whatever I'm talking now, whatever I showed you now, this is all default. No matter whatever Microsoft plan you are, 365 plan you are in, you'll be getting this. Okay, this is something which I really wanted to bring upon. So yeah. So defense, and the next thing is the encryption. This is something which I just spoke about in our slide, and also hashing. So I'll take a pause here. So any questions, any queries and specific to Microsoft security, whatever we saw now, have anything, you can just put it in the chat. If not, let's keep moving on. Now, the next layer which we want to talk about is Microsoft identity. And now identity is really a big deal. No matter if you have decided your mind that you have to get into cloud security, you always need to make sure that security is something which you need to focus upon. Okay. So from the Microsoft Azure identity, let's look into this. So as we all know, when it comes to Microsoft identity, the identity and access management layer for Microsoft Cloud Services is always Azure Active Directory only. We all know the traditional on-prem Active Directory, which used to be there as a part of your Windows server, which still exists. If you're one of the customers who is, I mean, most of the customers today, they're running a hybrid model, right? You'll be having your on-prem Active Directory, and all for your clouds, there is an Azure Active Directory, you'll be syncing the identities. So Azure AD, as you know, it provides both access to both external and internal. There are a lot of similarities between your on-prem Active Directory and Azure Active Directory, but please bear in mind that they both are not the same. I mean, this is a cloud IAM solution that is an on-prem IAM solution, right? And Active Directory can offer a lot. And at this point in time, whatever those 10 things or 100 things which Active Directory can do, your Azure AD can't be doing that. And that is a slide which I'll be talking about, that the differences between all this. And some features that are included, your MFA, SSO, conditional access. And as you know, Azure AD has multiple licensing options. You get the free, something which comes with your Office 365, then the P1 and P2, which you need to purchase on top of whatever you get. Now, this is sort of a comparison which I wanted to bring upon. So when it comes to identity and access management, right? So there are three different products which are offering this in the Microsoft stack. First is your Active Directory, which I said this is the complete on-prem traditional Active Directory that we have been seeing for a very, very long time. If you're somebody who's like me, who has been in the industry for 10 plus years, right? So you know the on-prem Active Directory, a lot of things that can be done there, and even it still exists, right? Then you have the Azure AD. As I said, this is something which is nothing but the cloud IAM. No matter whichever Microsoft cloud you have, you'll be getting a version of Azure AD with that. Then you also have the Azure AD domain services also. Now, what is this Azure AD domain service? Just think of this as a PaaS equivalent of Active Directory. This is a PaaS service. This is a Microsoft Azure service. Somehow I don't see a lot of people even using this, but there are some customers who are heavily using the Azure AD domain service. But this is a PaaS equivalent of your Active Directory. And from a future standpoint, this is what you need to understand, right? So one among the core differences, right? So your Active Directory, it always follows a network-based authentication, like your NTLM, Kerberos, those kind of stuff. But your Azure AD, this is most web-based, like your OAuth, SML. It also has OpenID support, right? So, and each has its own set of strong points and whatever. So based upon whatever service you're using, this could be, this is how we need to figure out. So group policies, of course, you'll be seeing that in Active Directory, but your Azure AD doesn't really have a group policy kind of a service. So this is a reference which I picked from one of the Microsoft MVP's blog. I just wanted to put it out here. Now, looking at a bigger picture of Active Directory. So this is Azure AD. Now, whatever you're seeing towards your right-hand side, this is the traditional on-prem Active Directory. And whatever you're seeing towards your left-hand side, this is the Azure AD. Okay, now just to spend a quick minute on this and help you understand how this is set up, right? So, of course, as we all know, right? So in the world of on-prem, we used to have the server fabric. Now, whatever on-prem servers that you're going after, and on top of that, the server building team, they would have a virtualization layer, and they will, let's say, for instance, you say that, hey, I want a Windows server built for me because we are building some domain controllers or whatever. So they'll be putting then on the top of the virtualization layer, they'll be installing the operating system, the Windows Server Active, and the Windows Server, and they'll be giving it to you. On top of that, you'll be installing all the necessary ADDS services, right? So then you'll also be having the file server, which is part of your own on-prem infrastructure. Then there is going to be VM applications. Applications could be your own line of business application, something that you have developed in-house, or any other solution which is talking to your on-prem Active Directory, right? And then, as I said, this is domain controller. This is the server AD, and inside your AD, you can have your users, computers, your groups, your printers, your group policies. Everything will be living within your on-prem AD. So that is the place where all the configurations are made, right? And a user here, so he'll be connected to the network, and then he can start accessing all this on-prem stuff. And if he's not connected to the network, he has to be logged into the VPN. So then he can go ahead and connect everything. But whereas when you look at the cloud world, Azure AD, right? So as I said, this is completely a cloud-only service. Okay, and if you look at things here, the same concept here, you can have users here, groups here, right? But you can't have group policies here. There is nothing called as an NTLM or Kerberos, those kind of stuff here. There is no concept of domain controller here. right? Everything is configured in the Microsoft data center, and you're just simply leveraging this cloud service. And as you all know, this is only a UPN only service. Here you might be putting your domain slash username and then your password, but here it will be a UPN kind of like your first name dot last name at the rate your company.com and then your password, right? So this always follows a UPN format. And with Azure AD, let's say we are talking about Microsoft 365. If you're purchasing Microsoft 365, or if you're going after that cloud, of course, you'll be getting Azure AD, you'll be getting all the services. Then if you want to have like MDM or MAM solutions such as Intune and those kind of stuff, you can have it. But these are some benefits that you would get with your Azure AD. Now, a lot of these things are something which you need to purchase in addition. You don't get that out of the box. Okay. And yeah, and if at all you want to build something between these two, now say for instance, you're trying to build a new application, right? And maybe part of your user should be accessing that it's an on-prem application. Part of your user should be accessing that on-prem application using Azure AD, and maybe your own internal users should be accessing those applications within their on-prem username and password. Then you can build these kind of express route or whatever connections that you need to make. But this is just a bigger picture, like on-prem versus Azure AD and how things are different. And if at all you want to do this, right? And if at all you have a computer, if you're a completely cloud only organization, you can have your you can have your Windows 10 computers Azure AD joined. Okay. Or if you're having something like a bring your own device concept, right? Then you can have your computers registered to Azure AD. Or if you're like a proper enterprise company, you have a good amount of on-premises data, then you also have cloud services, then you can have your computer hybrid AD joined so that you can be accessing your on-prem application also, you can be accessing your cloud application also by doing an SSO. So this is something that you need to have a very good, and this is how this is a bigger picture, just a high, like you can just think of this as a bird's eye view of Active Directory and Azure AD. And this is a good sort of an animation of the cloud services. You have cloud apps and SaaS services, mobile and personal devices, and your organizational and social identity. So everything. So Azure AD is something which can offer all this capabilities. So it is nothing but it's called as an intelligent identity control plane, right? So it is, as I said, right, it is just not all the cloud stuff also. You can also, using the power of Azure AD app proxy, you can use your cloud identity and you can access your on-prem applications also. And the best part here is it also supports your open standards. So if you have solutions if you have built some custom tools or custom solutions, SaaS services which supports open standard, you also need to be mindful that Azure AD also supports all these open standards. So yeah, as long as your solution supports this, you can log into that solution using Azure AD. You can simply do an SSO. And the best part about Azure Active Directory is it's the world's largest IAM solution, which and it also has integrations with a lot of other third-party solutions also. And if you look at these numbers, these vendors that I'm showing you, these brands, most of them are Microsoft's competitors. Things such as your Google Shoot, which is called as Google Workspace now, then your Workplace by Facebook, a lot of these things which are Microsoft's competitors. So as you need to know, right, a complete identity and access management solution is what Microsoft Identity is. And this is just a small mind map to help you understand, to help you figure out what are the different services which your Azure AD can offer, starting with directory services. If you're talking about federation, like traditionally we used to have ADFS, now we have the SSO. It can offer federation service, right? Then you have the IDP connector from your on-prem. If you want to sync identities, it has the provisioning engine, HR system, right? If at all you have like you have like Workday or whatever, which is your external HR system, and how can we import data from there and bring it to Azure AD, those kind of things can be done, or databases, right? Or maybe your HRDB is something else, and how you can get data from there. An app proxy, right? As I said, if you want to make use of your Office 365 account to access one of your on-prem applications, it could be a web app, it could be anything, or maybe if you're running a SharePoint on-prem instance and you want to access that using your Office 365 username and password, you could do that using your app proxy. Then it also has a good amount of event logs, because wherein you can go and pull out all the auditing that's happened here. And MFA, I mean, in the on-prem world, you have to specifically build a third-party solution, or you have to separately have an MFA server, but with your Azure AD, you get that. And then the different sign-in providers also which it supports. So at the end, this is the bigger picture that you need to be mindful of when it comes to your Microsoft identity, right? So um, from an authentication authorization standpoint, these are the services it has. Then directory management, and if you're talking about identity governance and administration, RBAC, which is really really important. Or if you're somebody who has been a developer, who's and for that also we have solutions, and custom IAM also. If you're talking about B2B, B2C, those kind of scenarios, we have those things also. It's a complete IAM solution that you need to understand. Now, the next thing that we'll be moving is our Microsoft compliance. I'll take a pause here. So any questions that you want to put in the chat? If not, let's keep moving on. And as I said, if you see that is all theory and I'm not showing any demos, as I clearly said in the beginning, this was intentional because this is fundamentals. We really want to understand what exactly exists here. What are the different tools, services, and solutions that we have here before even diving into each and every single solution and doing sessions on that. Okay. Now, the next layer that we want to focus upon is Microsoft compliance. This is often one of those areas which we don't normally look into, right? That is a proper compliance officer or people in different roles, maybe somebody in the city office or somebody in the top level who has been doing all this stuff. So we very rarely come into picture, right? The biggest thing that you might be, maybe you'll be just called to run a e-discovery case or pull out do some only those are the things. But it's very very important to understand what are the different solutions which Microsoft has, even from a compliance standpoint, right? Because compliance is really a very big obligation in a ever changing digital estate. Okay, because these are some biggest challenges which companies are facing today. There is so much of data, and data is just simply growing twice every single year, right? So preventing data leak is always a problem, and evolving regulations. If you're a multinational company, it's quite hard to keep up with all the regulations each company is coming up with, right? Maybe you have your operations in EU, then you have your operations in APAC, then in North America, then in different parts of the world. Each and every single country has their own sort of regulations, and you really need to be mindful of all those things because you have people who are working from there, you have their data, or maybe your customers are from there. So you really need to abide by all those standards. Okay, and managing the data lifecycle, like for how long can I even keep the data, right? If you're a bank, or if you're maybe if you're into healthcare, for how long should I retain data, or after a certain point in time, like should I be flushing out data? So these are all some kind of compliance challenges which organizations face. And Microsoft compliance offerings are there. Like Microsoft has a lot of tools specifically which are tailor made only for these. And as I said, right, so this is some data, which is some problems which I've just been talking about. The amount of data is expected to grow double every time. And 54% of organizations, they say the lack of visibility across their digital estate. And that's true for everybody. Right? Today, we don't even know what kind of data exists in your SharePoint, what kind of data people are keeping in their OneDrive for business, what kind of data transfer is happening on Exchange, and in Teams, what is happening. You simply can't have control over all these things, right? And the regulatory bodies. So what what each country is coming up with, what is their legal talking about, what kind of standards or regulations they are coming up with. And also you need to really have some proper automation in place because not a lot of these things can be simply done using manual work. I mean, it's simply not possible to do that with so much of data around. And for this purpose, Microsoft has come up with their intelligent compliance and risk management solutions, and this falls under these four pillars. The first one is information protection and governance. Okay, so this is the very first pillar, and we have specific point solutions for this. Then we have the insider risk management, right? So when I speak about information protection and governance, like how do I protect information? As I said in the very beginning, you might be thinking that I spoke about information protection even on Microsoft security, then I'm seeing the same thing here also. Because that's the way it has been designed, right? So something that you're seeing in security can be even seen on identity. Something that you're seeing on identity can be even seen on compliance, and it can be vice versa. Okay, that is how our solutions are designed, and that is the way Microsoft has designed their solutions. So the information protection and governance, like as I said, your data, your customers' data, what is sensitive, what is not sensitive, and if I'm sharing sensitive information, what are the kind of encryption that I need to follow? Is it even okay to share it? Those kind of things comes under your information protection and governance, as I spoke about, right? So for how long can I retain data, or am I even allowed to keep that kind of data, or should I be flushing it out? Okay. Then you have insider risk management. Now this is really key, right? So most of the time when we are talking about risk or threat, we guys will be always focusing upon people who can bring damage from outside, but we always tend to forget about what our own employees can do. Something with somebody, a rogue admin or somebody with a malicious intent, what can he do, right? Maybe somebody is not happy with your company, he put down his papers, he's going to leave, and he's stealing whatever information he can, and maybe he's going to a competitor, right? So whatever data he wants, he can just remove it and he can go. So what kind of, how do I control all those kind of insider risk management? Then discover and respond. This is basically when you want to do some kind of auditing, forensic analysis, right? What kind of logs does Microsoft have? What is the retention for those logs? What kind of information do they have? Even if I want to run an audit, how can I go about it, right? And last, your compliance management for all the data, like how do I comply with all these regulations which has been set across, right? So what are the different tools which Microsoft can have? So this is sort of the bigger picture when it comes to the compliance. So under your information protection and governance, these are the point solutions that we have. We have the MIP, which I spoke about, the Microsoft Information Protection, then the Microsoft Information Governance, DLP, Data Loss Prevention also. So today DLP, I mean, I know the DLP, which I was the Microsoft DLP, which was really poor, like many years back. Nobody even bothered about Microsoft's DLP. But today Microsoft has come up with a completely full-fledged unified DLP, and they can secure the data that you're putting inside Microsoft Cloud, like Office 365. And that can also take care of the content that you're putting in on your endpoints, like your computer. And this is also can be extended to your Teams chat and channel messages also. And then advanced message encryption and customer key. From these are the different solutions that we have here. And from an insider risk management standpoint, as I said, insider risk management in itself is its own solution wherein you can have different workflows, like an employee has been terminated, or maybe an employee has been put down his papers. That can be a workflow which runs, which sort of completely audits his behavior, his activities, what exactly he's doing. Is he downloading mass amount of data, right? Then the workflow can trigger an alert, let the HR know or the manager know. So those kind of stuff can be done. Then you also have communication compliance, as the name itself says. Like, are people following the proper standards when they're communicating with each other or even with their customers? So you can run the scanning across emails, SharePoint, Yammer, Teams, like whatever the tools or channels where people would be communicating both within themselves internally or even externally to their customers and partners. You can use communication compliance for that. Then we have the customer logbox, privilege access management, and information barrier. So information barrier is nothing but, as the name itself says, right? How do I bar people sharing information within each other? And why do I even need to do this in the first place? Right now, think of a scenario wherein you're a bank, okay, and there is a part of the company which is heavily dealing with high customer sensitive information, and there is another part of the company which is completely into marketing and whatever. And as a part of your ethical standards, as a part of your regulator, you don't really want these two people talking to each other. No form of communication at all. They should not be able to have email conversations, chat, nothing. Anything which can be happening within the boundary of Office 365, none of those communication should be happening. So in that case, you can start looking at information barrier, which is a solution that we have. Right. Then, and under discover and respond, you have the e-discovery, of course, to run legal cases, to put a mailbox on hold. Somebody has been deleting emails, and you really want to keep an eye and understand why this person is really doing all this, right? So put his mailbox on hold, run legal cases, and also auditing and advanced auditing. So one thing which you really need to know in Office 365 is the bare minimum auditing that you get for your SharePoint, Exchange, OneDrive, Teams, and all the other workloads that you have in Office 365. It's just 90 days. After 90 days, it will go off. So maybe you as a customer, you want to retain that audit logs for a very long period of time. Then you need to go after the advanced auditing functionality. This is a separate licensing altogether. So you can go for, with that, you'll be getting 1 year of audit log retention. And you can also have it for 10 years also, that is a per plan. So that in terms of forensic, and some companies really want to have it like this. So if you're working for such customer, or maybe that's the way your employer is, so start looking at advanced audit also. And finally, we have the compliance management, the compliance score and compliance manager. So this is something which is going to talk about, this is an algorithm which runs on your tenant, and it gives you a rating about how exactly you're doing from a compliance standpoint. That's what the compliance score is all about. So that is everything which I had from a Microsoft. So we spoke about Microsoft security, then we spoke about Microsoft identity, then we also spoke about Microsoft compliance. So these are the three solutions that we looked at. So now for the next 10 to 15 minutes, I just want to talk about, now that we understand that, and I know that this has been mouthful, I've been talking for quite some time, too much of information which is going into your head. I said in identity you have these 100 solutions, in security you have all these crazy things, and in compliance I have all these things, something which you might not even be heard about, right? So you understand that, okay, there is a lot here, but I'm still not clear about how to get started, man. Like what exactly is the deal here? So many things around. How do I figure out where do I start? For those kind of things, is what I'm saying is, how about building your own cybersecurity framework? When I say framework itself, right? The name itself says, how can I go about it? How can I figure out where exactly these things fit in? Only then you have that figured out, you can get started with that, right? So for that, Microsoft has this cybersecurity reference architecture. Now, if you look at it, it might make sense, right? You can see that, hey, I have SaaS, then conditional access is here. These are all the solutions I have for information protection, Azure AD, blah, 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 all this kind of things. But you really need to understand this. You should be a guy coming from a security background. Only then a lot of these things which are given here is going to make sense. Okay. Then Microsoft also has this zero trust concept. The name itself says, right? So trust nothing and verify everything. And the same concept is there with Google. Google calls this as Beyond Corp, I believe. And then Amazon also has their own kind of support zero trust. Every company, I mean, a lot of these cloud vendors, they have their own zero trust methodology. And they also have a proper architecture design diagram like this. Well, this is really great, right? I mean, you get the picture, but even this is not going to help you get there, because we guys are new. We are coming newly into the security stuff. We really want something which can spoon feed us. So that's why I'm saying, how about building a very simple cyber security framework like this? Very, very simple. If you take a look at this, right? What I've done is, we have just categorized. Identity and access management is one domain in your cybersecurity framework. Then you have data protection, which is the next domain. Then you have device protection. Then you have logging and monitoring. Then this is compliance. Very pretty neat and simple. So this can fit into any cloud solution. If you're talking about Google also, yes, you can apply this framework. You can categorize. You can put this into all these buckets. If you're talking about Amazon, yes, you could do that there also. Talking about Oracle, IBM, yeah, right? So as long as they have a product for device protection, data protection, logging and monitoring, yes, you can categorize and put it, right? And what this framework is going to help you build, maybe if you're into advisory roles, maybe like organizations like one of these big fours, or maybe you're into client advisory, wherein you're looking into customers configuration tenant, and you're advising them about best practices, security controls. I'm talking about things such as your CIS, NIST controls and all. Then you can use this framework. Or even if you want to do Office 365 security workloads deployment, you could use this framework. So just take a good look at this. It'll make a lot more sense to you rather than seeing the previous ones. I mean, there is nothing bad in that. That is from Microsoft. It is really great. But for we as beginners, we really want something which can spoon feed us, which is very simple. And that is why I'm bringing up this. So how do I use this? Okay. Now, the first domain which we want to look into is identity and access management. Okay. Now, this is the domain. And under this, whatever you're seeing on your left-hand side is the capability. And whatever you're seeing towards your right-hand side is the equivalent Microsoft product. It's as simple as that. So from a capability standpoint, I'm saying MFA, SSO, conditional access, PIM, airbag. No matter whatever cloud you're using, this capability will be there. It's not going to be different. Okay. Maybe they may not be having certain capability, but that is fine. But that is standard. But whatever you're seeing towards your right hand side, that is only the Microsoft equivalent product for that. So if you're looking at, hey, does Microsoft Identity and Access Management have anything for MFA and SSO? Yes, it does. And what is that? Azure AD, SSO, and MFA. Do they have anything for conditional access? Yes, they do have. If I'm talking about PIM, Privileged Identity Management and Privileged Access Management, because I don't want my admins or consultants or somebody who's having global admin role, they shouldn't be having standing access. They should be having access only at a given point in time. Maybe they have to perform a task which is going to be for 8 hours. They raise a ticket. I mean, then the PIM request gets kicks in. The manager approves it. The access lives only for 8 hours, and after his job is done, that's it. The access vanishes. If you're looking at those kind of things, then you have PIM. On the flip side, you also have something called as PAM, privileged access management, right? We can think of this as safe locks. If at all you guys have dealt with psychotic server, those kind of things, right? So all your high level privilege credentials, right? You can put inside the safe lock, and every time you have to go check out your password and get it, because it will be simply rotating your password. Your passport is not static there. It will be keep on rotating. If you're looking at those kind of solutions, then you have PAM. Then for RBAC, B2B, identity governance, audit logging, for each and every single capability, as I said, this is the equivalent Microsoft product. But if you're not a Microsoft shop, right? So then what do I do? So these are the other players in this space, right? Because as I said, not every company can be completely dependent upon Microsoft product. There is a reason, there is a proper politics attached to it, if I can say that. I know this is being recorded, but there is a proper politics attached to it. Maybe from a technical standpoint, you might feel that you want to be a completely Microsoft shop, but then somebody else might be thinking differently. So, right. So if you're caught up in that scenario, these are the other players in this space, right? So Okta, right? Now, one thing which you need to know about Okta is this has been the first cloud only identity and access management solution, and they have been a very tough competitor for Microsoft uh, Azure AD for a very, very long time. Then Ping Identity. Like if you're talking from an SSO standpoint, Federation of Ping Identity has been a very tough competitor in that space. So similar way, we have a lot of other vendors in the cloud IAM piece. So these are some names that you need to be mindful of. Next is data protection domain. So under data protection, these are the different capabilities that I'm going to bring. And this is the equivalent Microsoft product. So you have DLP, data discovery, data classification, CASB, so on and so forth, right? And each and every equivalent Microsoft product. So DLP, of course, Microsoft has its own native DLP, which is Microsoft Unified DLP. For data discovery, you have MCAS, which is Microsoft's Cloud App Security. It's basically a CASB, but it can also do the work of your data discovery also. Then for data classification, you have the Microsoft Information Protection, so on and so forth. So these are the different point solutions. So what I mean by point solution is all the products that you're seeing here, they are meant to do only a specific task or maybe one or two. You can't use DLP to do something else for data classification. It's not meant for that. It's for data prevention. That's it. It can't classify the data. Or you can't be using it vice versa. Similar way, you can't be using an archival solution for something else. So these are all point solutions. And as I said, these are meant for a very specific purpose. So other players in this space, once again, if you're not a Microsoft shop, so these are the other vendors who are offering this space. And for whatever reason, if at all you're not seeing something which your organization is currently using or your employer is currently using, please be mindful that whatever I'm showing here, this is from Gartner's Magic Quadrant. Okay, this is not something which I like the most or whatever. This is data which Magic Quadrant is giving. So from their visionary leaders list, I've just picked it here and I put it. Now from a device protection domain, and this is one area which a lot of us really fail to focus, right? Because this is really for people who have been coming from an SCCM or desktop engineering background. Even I was not dealing with this a lot. I recently started doing this in some pockets here and there, but device protection also is a very, very big deal when it comes to your cloud or cyber security, right? Because today your endpoints are the one which are getting hacked the most and people are really taking away data from there. So if we're talking about security, yes, your device protection also is a very big deal. So under this, we have different capabilities, your MIM, MAM, MDM, device enrollment, endpoint security. So we also know that we had Microsoft Intune, which got rebranded into Microsoft Endpoint Manager. Your SCCM got rebranded into your Microsoft Configuration Manager. A lot of other things. We are talking about zero touch kind of deployment now, not those good old SCCM kind of deployments wherein they'll push the image to your computer in the lab, then they give. Now today we're talking about zero touch deployment. So a lot of these things which goes on from a device protection standpoint, and then there is a good amount of antivirus and other things also which comes within this. And if we're talking about other players in this space, so these are some other, of course, we all know VMware Workspace, AirWatch. So Jamf, This is specifically if you're a heavy Mac shop. So the enterprise management software that we have specifically for Mac endpoints is always going to be Jamf. So they have been in that space for a very, very long time. Then IBM Big Fix, which was the equivalent of SCCM, they were there, but now it has been just SCCM everywhere. Now, the next pillar, the second last pillar is your logging and monitoring. This is also very, very important. Basically, if you're looking at getting into SOC, security operations centers, right, and even gets logged, then what happens? Okay, so what do I do? How do I react to that? So that is where the logging and monitoring, like how do I get logged? Whatever gets logged and monitoring for those kind of sense, we have this logging and monitoring. So under this, the capabilities that we are seeing is your auditing logging, SIM, your cloud security posture management, alerts, and XDR. So these are the equivalent Microsoft products. So one thing which you need to know is Microsoft was not really in this space a few years back, at least for the past 2 years, they were not there. But they have just done a very good, I don't know what really Microsoft was thinking about. Nobody was even, a couple of years back, if somebody told me that Microsoft was a cloud security company or a security company, it would have been a big joke for me, right? But today, that's not the case. They have started investing on all the different security areas, and they're really coming up with very good solutions, and they're simply ruling that market. They are being considered as competitors towards McAfee, Symantec, Cisco's of the world. I mean, that's how big they have become. And these are the other players when it comes to the logging and monitoring domain. Later, when I share my slide, you guys can go ahead and take a good look at it. The reason why I'm saying other players in the space also is because if at all you're thinking about a career in these areas, it's very, very important that you know these solutions also. Because if you're giving interviews for cloud security, nobody is simply going to ask only Microsoft stuff. No, it never happens. Just only 25 or 30% is going to be Microsoft. So please bear that in mind, guys. They'll be always asking about, have you done anything on Splunk, right? What about SIM? What about this? What about that? So you should at least be having an understanding about how that operates, what it does, and all those kind of things. Compliance domain, this is something which we just saw. So these are the different, I'm not going to go through it because it's something which we just saw. So these are the different capabilities that we have there, an equivalent Microsoft product. And so these are the other players in this space which are offering the same capability which Microsoft is offering on the Microsoft compliance domain. So at last, if you're asking me about a complete product portfolio, this is how it is going to look like. For Microsoft Identity, these are all the tools, products, solutions, whatever you want to call. For Microsoft Security, these are all the tools, product solutions, and for Microsoft Compliance. So if you really want to excel in this space, so these are the services or products that you need to be very comfortable with, like how do they work, how do they operate, how do I configure it, how do I implement it, and how can I even start working on it, and licensing. Because licensing is really, really key, right? If there is anybody outside there who understands how Microsoft licensing works, I mean, it's just a joke, right? Not really everyone is clear about it. Even your Microsoft rep also can't be clear about it. And specifically when it comes to the security products, there is a lot. The way these things are licensed is really crazy, right? So, but just be mindful that these are all the different kind of products that we have, and you should be really good at how they work, how they operate, and how you deploy this. Towards our end, so as a conclusion, this is what I'm saying. I know I've been talking for a very, very long time, but for as a conclusion, the remote work is here to stay. Okay, guys. So even you like it or not, it doesn't really matter. Remote work is always going to be here to stay. And cybersecurity is becoming the top priority for many organizations in the new normal, right? Because as I simply said, we are all working from our homes. I mean, nobody really knows what you're doing, right? Identity is becoming the new security perimeter. That's your new thing that you're carrying. So, of course, cybersecurity is becoming the top priority, specifically cloud security in that area. And this is really key, right? You don't, if you're planning to get into cybersecurity or cloud security, because we're talking more specific, because cloud security is, I can say that cloud security is just a domain inside cybersecurity, because cybersecurity is really vast. You have network security, application security, blah, 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 hundreds of things are there, right? But if you're talking about only cloud security, right, you don't really need to be coming up with a big cybersecurity background. But it is very, very key that you understand how cloud operates and other different services in that. Because one of these things which I've been seeing in the industry is people coming up with this thing saying that, hey, I'm a cloud security architect, right? But unless and until you don't understand how a particular cloud service works, how are you even going to secure it, right? If you don't even know what are the solutions which Microsoft 365 has, Within that, what is SharePoint, what are the configurations in SharePoint, similar way Exchange, OneDrive, blah blah blah, and what are the different places where the data can be leaked. You simply don't know how to secure it, right? So that's what I'm coming up with. So you should be really, really having a good understanding of the cloud first, of their service. And then on top of that, you can learn about how to secure it. Just knowing the security products alone, how it works, and if you really don't know where to apply it, how to apply it, it doesn't make any sense. Okay, as I said, right? You may not really be a Microsoft shop, but if you're able to build your own cybersecurity framework, at least the way which I mapped, if you're able to put it inside your head, just map it that way, then your chances of becoming a rockstar professional is very, very high. And last but not least, this is something which I really hate in the industry. I don't mind saying this on the recording. Like, there is no one single person in this planet who has mastered in all the cloud services. Okay, so simply don't get caught up in the dogma. It simply doesn't exist. There can be somebody who says that, hey, I know everything in Microsoft 365, I know everything in Microsoft Azure, I know everything in AWS, I know everything in Google. It doesn't work that way. Okay, maybe if you're coming from an infrastructure background, you could be knowing some amount in Microsoft 365, some amount in your Microsoft Azure, maybe in AWS, that's all. And that's not going to be a chance that you'll be working on all these solutions every single day. It simply doesn't exist. So if at all you're trying to be, or if you're seeing some job posting somewhere, people saying that, hey, I want to know AWS, this, that, blah, 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 blah. Simply don't fall for all these things. It doesn't work that way. Be comfortable with what you know, play around with your strengths, play around with your perimeter, try to know where exactly you can keep your hands, and you'll be much better off. Trust me, guys. So simply don't waste yourself into all those things. And these are some key industry references and resources. This is something from Zero Trust, NIST, and CIS. I didn't get a chance to speak about this, but these are some industry standards and benchmarks that you really, really need to know if you're talking of if you are looking at a career in cloud security. Okay, so that's all I have, folks. So now is the time to ask questions. If at all you have any question, you can go ahead and start bringing that up. Thanks a lot. You've been so patient all this time. Thank you so much for that. But